press conference with Reverend Al Sharpton, Bill Crump's team, and Nolan Wells' parents. And I haven't gotten through it all yet. But I did think of something while I'm watching. I was interrupted a couple of times, so I had to pause because I am working at home while also trying to pay attention to the press conference. And I wanted to come to you guys and talk about something important because I think a lot of times people always think, oh, they always trying to make things about race. Everything is about race. Why do they have to throw race into the mix of everything, right? And so when we discussed the Carmelo Anthony trial, and I mentioned about race as a fabric and a part of everything that happens in America, that in this country we exist under a racial contract. The social contract is predicated on a racial contract. That is a fact. That is a fact. Okay? And there's a book called The Racial Contract by I think it's Robert Stuart Mills. Hold on, let me get the name of it. For those who may not be familiar. Charles Mills. I'm sorry, I don't know why I said Robert Stuart Mills. I don't know where I got all of that name from, y'all. But Charles Mills was the author of a book called The Racial Contract, right? And everything in this country's social contract theory, the Enlightenment thinkers who helped to develop social contract theories to help us to understand what was a necessity and the need for governance, right? They've based this on social contract theory. But when you had imperialism, when you had colonialism, and the impacts of those things in this country, hey, good morning, Purple. The impact of those things in this country and how it shaped this country, and not just this country, but the world. The disbursement of Black people around the world created this situation. And so we no longer have a social contract that can be void of race. The social contract is predicated on race. And so there are times that you will see me have conversations, and I can talk about events and things where I don't believe that race is the cause, but I believe that it becomes the agitating factor, right? It becomes the adjutant, right? That ends up being attached to a particular event, to a particular circumstance. And so when we looked at the Carmelo Anthony case, right? Based on how the interactions that took place with some of the teens, you could see some racial undertones in the way that they presented and approached this Black boy. Now, they might not have really even understood that that's what it was, because just like we possess African retentions that we don't always recognize, it can happen too in systems of white supremacy. There can be retentions and things that are passed on from generation to generation that an individual might not even recognize that the reason they do them has a racial undertone, right? And so I think that when we heard some of the things and some of the ways in which Carmelo was approached by these group of children, many of who did possess a different racial class than him, but some who were of color like him, but they also are color and have an experience here in America that is heavily, heavily drenched in race relations. And so I mentioned in that case that one of the reasons why Austin and Hunter thought that it was okay for them to speak to Carmelo the way that they did is because white bodies think that they have the right to police Black bodies and tell Black bodies what to do. And the fact that throughout that trial, we continue to hear they told him to leave. They didn't want him there. He had no right to be there. And all of this language in this public place and them trying to move and control what happened with Carmelo's Black body, that is a racial undertone, right? But do I think that those kids in that tent might have been aware and what they may have been doing may have been caused by race? No. But I think that some of their actions were part of racial undertones that exist because we live in America, where that social contract is heavily contingent upon the racial contract, right? And so now we are presented with this case in this situation with Nolan Wells. And he's this only black boy amongst 4 friends. The other 3 boys are white. They go to this island for 4th of July celebration, and then he comes up dead. And now everyone is up in arms, and they have their different feelings. Some people go all the way to the extreme and believe that race definitely was a major factor in what may have taken place. You have other people who are saying, why does everybody have to jump the gun? And why does race always have to be a factor? This is my position. What occurred did not have to come to be because of racism. Whatever took place, if there was some foul play and something did happen between the boys that day that caused whatever happened to Nolan Wells to happen, it may have had absolutely nothing to do with racism in this country. But unfortunately, once an incident with this type of genetic makeup happens in this country, racism definitely becomes the adjutant. Systemic racism, the system of racism, becomes an adjutant to the situation. Because how the investigation, how the public responds, how everything that happens after what takes place happens, it has a racial response. It is the reason why when I did the live just a few minutes ago, and I came in order for us to just get a brief summation of what happened with the unaliving of Nolan and what we are now anticipating to find out about that death, right? It is one of the reasons that I mentioned that we have to wait and see. We have to wait and see what happens. But I mentioned about how investigations that involve young adults, and when I say young adults, I'm talking about people from 18 to 25, right? How it is handled when there are children of color, young adults of color, versus how it is handled when you have white young adults. We have seen investigations that have been handled with young adults of color, where their faces and images have been plastered over the entire internet because they are persons of interest. They were the last people to be seen with this individual that is now no longer here. But we are looking at a circumstance where all major news outlets are now responding to the call that was issued out by one of the parents of one of the persons of interest, who she is a sitting judge, who said that she does not deem it appropriate that these kids, not young adults, but kids' faces are plastered over the internet when we have a dead boy. Because if we are going to say that those young adults are kids, then we are going to call Nolan we're going to refer to Nolan to what they were referred to. Just like I'm going to refer to Carmelo to what they're referred to. And those young adults that faces have now been blotted out from the internet, even though we know you can't erase it, but their faces have been blotted out to protect them and their privacy while they are persons of interest in a mysterious death that has taken place far too often. People of color have had to demand investigations into missing persons, into deaths, into rapes. They've had to conduct their own investigations. This is historically proven because of the integrity of the system being able to conduct a proper investigation into these matters. So what we are seeing is not anything unusual. That's another effect of racism. That's another way that racism agitates a situation that might not be about race. And so what we have to understand is that the situation that caused the tragedy might not be about race. Sure, there may be some racial undertones in the events that took place, but it might not necessarily be about race, but how everything is handled from the moment of the occurrence is definitely impacted by race in this country. You cannot separate the two. How a suspect is going to be handled is going to be determined upon race. How a victim is handled is going to be determined upon race. And this is the thing that some people of color and then many people who are not of color do not understand. And why they get angry when race is brought out in situations like this. But the reason that this comes to be is because we have a social contract in this country that is dependent and determined on the racial contract. You cannot separate the two. So no matter what happens, whether it's in the privacy of your home, whether it's amongst a group of friends, whether it's out at a public event, once it takes place, how people respond, race is going to become a part of it. Because it's going to affect how people look at the victim. It's going to affect how people look at the perpetrators. And then that is the part. It is going to affect how law enforcement responds. It is going to affect the justifications and the excuses that are made for certain individuals while other individuals are made to be monsters and demons. This is the impact of systemic racism. You cannot separate it. It is what we exist in. It's terrible. It's terrible, but it is the reality. And so when Ben Crump and Al Sharpton and all of these other political black activists are standing up and they are saying that we have to ensure that there's going to be a proper investigation because of the history of this country, that is a fact. That is a fact. And it is one that white America is not comfortable with. And sorry, but not sorry. It is the history of this country to kill black bodies and then hide it. It is the history of this country to disregard black bodies, dispose of black bodies, and not hold the people who did it accountable for it. So we want to hear the same call to action that they had when the whole altercation happened with Austin Metcalf, the stabbing, and they called those white supremacists who were calling to action and demanding that something be done. We want them to support that same call to action in this instance. It doesn't change. The only thing that changes is the who. That's what changed. Nothing changes. Any group should expect that the same level of investigation that they wanted to happen in looking into what Carmelo Anthony did to this young boy, Austin Metcalf, to determine whether it was self-defense or not. They should demand that these boys be looked into for it to be determined if something was done or not. Why did they have this boy's cell phone? Why did they have his keys? Why, when they contact his mom to ask his mom, had she heard from him? Why didn't they alert her that they had his cell phone and his keys? Why did she have to locate his cell phone to find out that his cell phone was in their possession? There's a contradiction between what the girl that they claim that he stayed behind to entertain is saying and what they're saying. It doesn't add up. And so anybody in this country should be demanding a proper investigation. But because of systems of racism in this country, there is one group of individuals who believe that their young people's faces should not be plastered on the internet in order to get information on an investigation. Hey, Miller, how are you? Yeah, they think this. And they came out and they vocalized it. We've never heard a demand from any black family whose children have been plastered over the internet because there's a question of whether they've been involved in a crime or know something about a crime. And they're calling demand for their children's faces to be taken off of out of the media. We've never heard a response to that. We've never seen a response to anything like that. But as soon as this judge, whose son is a person of interest, says, I want my kid's face off the internet, so what that my kid ain't no kid? So what it's a young adult? I want their face off the internet. I don't care about the fact that something may have happened and that my child might know something, or that the children that were with them, or somebody might see my son's face or see my daughter's face, might be able to give some leads onto what they saw occur that day. So what? I don't want it on there. Take it off. And what did the media do to respond? They took it off. We've never seen no shit like that. So when we say this is about race, that's what we mean. Some of us do mean that, they believe that these white boys might have done something nefarious to this black boy. That's a possibility. I'm not taking that off the table. But I can start with the bare bones. The bare bones says that the way that this is being looked at and handled would not be handled the same way if the role was reversed. And that is the impact of racism in this country. How we view victims, how we view perpetrators. We cannot separate the two. It is the foundation of what this country was built on. It's something that this country does not want to take accountability and atone for. And it is the reason why it is going to continue to be a part of the fabric of this country just as much as the flag of the United States of America. Because it's what made this country. The blood of racism is what made this country. And so you can't separate it out. So when I come live, or when you're listening to others who come live and they speak about what their idea of how the system of racism is impacting certain issues, it's not as black and white as people think. It's not that it's the scenario. It's not that it's the situation. It is all of the response to the systems that are responsible for dealing with the situation after it occurs that brings this into fruition and causes this response. There should be no absurdity about parents wanting to have an integral investigation into what happened to their son. But because of systems of racism, because whites reject that kind of questioning from people of color, and it's a how dare you response. How dare you say we are not capable of investigating what happened to your child? Well, it's historically proven that you don't. It is historically proven that people of color have had to create their own agencies in order to send investigations out, in order to try to look into these type of situations. That is historical. It is a fact. And so there should be no absurdity when it happens. There should be no outrage and no anger. There should be no demand for people who are of interest in a crime for their faces to be taken out of the public view. And even if the demand is made, it is not expected that the public will adhere to it. But in this instance, it is. And so, you guys, I just wanted to come and I wanted to kind of like infuse that into the conversation, because I know a lot of time people think, oh, all of these Black Power people, they always thinking everything is about color. No, yes and no. Yes and no. It is. And on that, you guys, I am out for now. Miller, I am coming back to do a live later on about Jaden Alexis and Blueface. I'm going to come back on at 8. I don't know if you got a notification for that or not. Purple, thank you for coming in. I love you. Thank you for always appreciating the information that's being put out into this space. I appreciate you for always providing your feedback and always supporting. And I will talk to you guys soon, maybe sooner than later. I don't know. I haven't finished the press conference. I'm still listening, but I wanted to provide that information because I think it's important. I think sometimes it gets lost on what people are saying when they're saying, okay, there is some type of racial impact on this situation. And it's not always that the situation was infused or that racism was responsible for the situation, but that now how things are turning out, how things are being handled when the systems that are supposed to be there to protect us in order to conduct the proper investigations, that they fail us, and they fail because of that racial element. On that, okay, Miller, I'm going to be looking forward to you coming back later on and talking with you guys about something a little more lighthearted. Yes. Javia Harris, I do want to talk about that. I did post that case. I do want to talk about that. So I'll try to see if maybe we can do that tomorrow. Because this weekend I'm not doing anything. I did stuff last weekend and I had a busy week. And then I came live a couple of times this week, even though I had a busy week. And so this weekend I'm kind of just gonna like chill out. I might end up having Shuggy for one day. I might not. I haven't heard back from my mama yet. So hope maybe I won't. But I'm not planning really to do anything major. I might have to go out and go do some things, but I have no plans, like event plans. So maybe tomorrow we'll be able to come back on and talk about Javia, because tonight I'm going to try to talk about Jaden Alexis, the release of that sex tape, not once but twice, and give some perspective on where Jaden may be going from here, or where I hope she will go from here. So thank you guys for coming in. Thank you for always being interested in my perspective and what I got to say. I enjoy talking to you guys. This is a pleasure. This is not anything other. I come on here because this is a guilty pleasure. I come on here because it's a pleasure to come talk to you guys. I enjoy talking to every single one of y'all. And I will talk to you guys soon.